March 2011. Dera in the south of Syria. 4 coffins for 4 Syrians killed for protesting peacefully against their government. The first to die in a conflict that's gone on to take as many as 400,000 lives. It began with peaceful protests inspired by uprisings across the Arab world, demanding change. They came from all walks of life. Zaidun al-Zawabi was a university professor in Damascus.
The first time I chanted freedom, it took me a couple of minutes amongst the crowd to say, I was like this. And then I said, freedom! And it was the first time I hear myself. At the age of 38, I hear my sound, my voice. I can feel it. Oh my God, I can say it.
Syria erupted in protest. Rising up against the Assad regime that had controlled the country for 4 decades. Fear of the regime had been broken. Like Zaidun, many believed they could bring about change as others had in Egypt, Libya and Tunisia.
We thought, keep pushing with peaceful movement, we will get somewhere. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. Unfortunately now, this is a civil war.
The Assad regime responded to peaceful protests with brutal repression. At first with Kalashnikovs, and then tanks. Gunning down unarmed civilians in the streets. For months, protesters refused to take up weapons themselves. Another peaceful demonstration in Badama in northern Syria. Among the chanters, the headmaster of the town's school. Mahmoud Musa fled the country soon afterwards after regime reprisals for the protests. He's remained non-violent throughout, but remembers his friends insisting back then they had no choice but to take up arms.
They themselves said, power needs power. So they use power against us, so we have to be powerful like them. We can't resist them except by power. They use weapons, we have to use weapons. And weapons at that time somehow had a louder voice than us.
The descent into Syria's apocalypse had begun. What had started as a peaceful uprising was turning into one of the most bitter, drawn-out civil wars the world has ever known. For 5 years now, the world has looked on as Syria has sunk deeper and deeper into conflict. Moments have come and gone when there may have been the chance to pull the country back from the brink. But America, Europe and other powers have been too unwilling, indecisive or distracted to seize the opportunity. For many, the crucial year was 2012. Early on, many rebels weren't yet radicalised. They wanted the regime to fall, and they hoped the West, particularly the United States, would help. But America was preoccupied.
Are you ready to go?
While its president was distracted with his bid to stay in the White House, in Syria, a vacuum was forming. In that void, Islamist extremism grew more powerful. Sky News filmed these rebels in the north of Syria in October 2012. The beards and bandanas showed their radicalisation. Their commander didn't want to be identified, but said they'd given up on hope from the West.
We ask help from everyone around us, but all we got just words. They give us words, not real actions.
America and Europe demanded Bashar al-Assad leave office, but didn't do enough to make it happen. Observers, including those who advised the British government at the time, say the West was naive about the Syrian leader and his regime.
We clearly had, as I say, a lot of wishful thinking that Assad would read the writing on the wall and just leave. They knew that if the revolution, so-called revolution, succeeded, in many ways they may well be driven into the sea. And so there was no way they felt that they were going to be just hand over power and expect that there'd be some benign elections.
A year later, another chance to intervene. Growing evidence the Syrian regime was using chemical weapons on its own people. As many as 1,400 civilians, men, women and children, may have been killed. A direct challenge by the Syrian regime to the US president and a threat he'd made earlier.
A red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized.
But Obama did nothing, unable to count on backing for military action from Britain and the US Congress, save from acting in the end by a deal to remove Syria's chemical weapons. It was a major blow for Syria's rebels.
The Syrian opposition were not so much interested in the chemical weapons. What they wanted to do was see the West become militarily involved in attacking Assad. That would have been a huge step change as they would see it. And therefore the fact that America did not use its military capability at that crucial moment obviously was a very serious setback for them.
Many Syrians gave up hoping the world would ever now come to their aid. That despair helped the rise of Islamic State. Spawned from Al-Qaeda in Iraq, it was even more brutal and menacing. And far better at propaganda. In June 2014, it swept out of Syria to take vast swathes of Iraq and huge amounts of US-supplied weapons from the routed Iraqi army that outnumbered it by more than 10 to 1.
The blood of David Haynes was on your hands, Cameron.
Its gruesome executions of Western hostages transformed the war in Syria, drawing in America to bomb from the air, along with coalition partners joined eventually by Britain. Islamic State's enemies warned prophetically it was a danger far beyond Syria's borders.
It definitely is a different kind of terrorism. It's a much more aggressive, more merciless, brutal system. And I say again, this is the front on the war on terrorism. And if we don't stop this here, they will come for the West. They'll come for England, they'll come for Europe, they'll come for the United States.
A multi-nation coalition has failed to destroy Islamic State and failed to avert this. A wave of humanity erupting from Syria and sweeping across Europe. The biggest refugee crisis since World War II, and threatening to destabilise countries far beyond Syria.
The Syrian refugee crisis is undoubtedly the humanitarian catastrophe of the 21st century so far. Up to 500,000 dead, 5 million refugees pouring into neighbouring states, 7 million people homeless across Syria itself. And the reverberations of the crisis, political instability in the Middle East, political instability in Europe as well, as a result of this war that seems to be without end.
Inside Syria, whole cities have been utterly devastated. These shocking drone pictures, filmed by a Russian team, show the staggering devastation in Homs, a city reduced to rubble, emptied of people. Syria's conflict is now being fought by foreigners as much as Syrians. These fighters are from the Lebanese Shia militia Hezbollah, supporting Assad on the ground, along with Iranians. In the air, Russia's given enough support to save the regime from collapse. Other outside powers have armed rebels on the other side to fight back. A revolution has mutated into a proxy war, ripping Syria apart and causing a mass exodus of its people. Millions of them now live in Syria's neighbouring countries. Forced into exile like Mahmoud Musa, they can only look on in despair as their country continues being destroyed.
It is like when you look at yourself in the mirror and see your eyes, your body, yellow, tired because of sickness. Yeah, and you can't do nothing.
Zaidun al-Zawabi now runs a medical charity in southern Turkey. His wife and children live in Germany. He prays for the day Syria's nightmare will be over and he and his family can return to their home.
You will never know what does that mean. Losing your homeland, losing your country. You would never think, what does it mean to look at the country torn, destroyed, children becoming orphans, children dying of lack of vaccine, and widows. Man, there is nothing worse than that. The ugliest thing is war. And the ugliest thing is when that war happens in your country.
Ceasefires have taken hold in parts of Syria. But without a political solution to this devastating conflict, the outlook remains bleak. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News.